So up next, I'm going to hand it to our Qualys CEO, Sumedh Thakar, to discuss how federal agencies can strengthen and operationalize their cyber risk programs to align with the rapid pace of CDM objectives. Thank you again,
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. We're super excited. This is our first public sector conference that Qualys has done. And as we were working with the team here, our partner, GovExec, looking to figure out what are the most relevant topics. It was interesting to see that whether it's government or whether it's the private sector, it's pretty much the same challenges that everybody's facing. And so really happy to see the agenda today. Great conversation by Monica here. And so we're super excited to spend the day and learn from you and then sort of give an insight on what we're seeing globally as well. And what we're looking forward to in terms of being able to help you achieve your mission or plenty of missions depending on how many directives come out every month. But just quick introduction. So I've been at Qualys for 20-something years. I started as a software engineer, and I remember back then, if a company was able to scan their entire network for, finish scanning their entire network for vulnerabilities of all their assets, which was 5,000 assets maybe in every quarter, that was considered gold standard. That was not a key priority. People were like, nothing's going to happen. It's inside my firewall. And so the firewall back then was the original zero trust. So now we talk about all the other stuff, but that was the original zero trust. And so from that point on, we have come a very long way today, and I want to talk a little bit about that. So hopefully all of you know about Qualys, but we are essentially a global leader in cyber risk management and remediation. Going beyond vulnerability management, we have a significant footprint globally across pretty much all organizations, top organizations in the world. Fortune all the way from Forbes 50 down to the Forbes Global 2000 and a significant number of SME, SMB customers as well. The way I like to say this is that it is impossible for you to go through your day today without using a product that's secured by Qualys. Pretty much every bank globally, every large bank, pretty much every cloud provider, your biggest phone manufacturer, if you use any of those, today Qualys is significantly embedded and provides a big part of what, in terms of the way that they do security. We, of course, work closely with the federal government as well here. Very proud to be working closely with CISA, DHS, and for example, the cyber hygiene program. Qualys is a key part of that program to help. I think we do like 35,000 websites that are continuously discovered and scanned to make sure that agencies, especially the smaller ones, are protected and are given the protection that is otherwise hard to find. And so today we are excited to be doing more. We also do a lot with federal governments globally as well. And in fact, if you see how cybersecurity today is an enabler for digital transformation. And digital transformation is social transformation in many, many countries that we work with. So if you look at countries like Brazil, countries like India, where biometric identity, digital payments using QR codes, et cetera, are uplifting people out of financial exclusion purely because of governments going through significant digital transformation. And if there is no trust in those systems, people will not use these systems. And so working closely everywhere in the world has given us a lot of insight, understanding, experience. And so we continue to look forward to working and bringing that together. As I said, we're deployed globally, and we are FedRAMP authorized. So we're FedRAMP moderate and intently waiting for our final FedRAMP high certification to go through. But it is a commitment that we have made to ensure that federal government and citizen data is actually secured with the absolute best practices that are available. And we're super happy to be partnering with that program. There's a lot happening in the recent years from the government. The administration has been, starting with the executive order on cybersecurity, exactly for the same reason that today, when the government is leveraging digital transformation to be able to provide fast, quick access to services across every single aspect of government, whether it's federal, whether it's local, whether it's state. It's become super important that access to this data is very well protected, very well controlled. There's privacy concerns, there's cybersecurity concerns on somebody manipulating this information. There's concerns around how do we make sure that we're protecting this information. And it's really good to see the evolution in the last few years, starting from that executive order, coming up all the way to the most recent focus on zero trust as an architecture to be able to provide some framework. Now, this is very important because before this, without any of these directives, a lot of it was just go take care of it. Just make sure we don't get hacked, which is not a very, it's a nice directive, but it's not very prescriptive, because the next question is, well, how much money will you give me to make sure that nothing's gonna get hacked? And then it comes down to how much risk do I have? And so having these kind of, I think it's a process, it's a journey. I think we will see more refinement coming out, but all of these things are really going to overall help agencies, as Monica also talked about, have some form of, hey, here's what we are learning across all agencies. How do we focus on the areas that are actually going to have impact? As she said, nobody has unlimited resources and unlimited budget. And so the more of these things come up, the question is, how do we ensure that we have the right tools and the right mechanism to meet these requirements? But more importantly, actually have an impact, right? Like, you don't want a compliance-based just check, but how do you validate that actually we're successfully able to protect the things and the data that we are looking to protect? And data is the most important thing for a lot of people today that they focus on. Now, there's I think zero trust, there's a lot of conversation about that, and I'm sure you guys are hounded all the time with vendors saying they have the ultimate zero trust solution. You just check a box and that's going to take care of it. But it actually is something that has essentially two components. First, you need to know what you have, and then you need to enforce the zero trust. And the interesting thing about zero trust is that you cannot have zero trust without automation. You need automation to be able to actually enforce zero trust. The problem is that you cannot do automation without having trust in what you're automating. So the real question here is, who do we trust? We trust things that we know. So the question is, how many of you know your assets? Nobody. Oh, can you go one slide back? Sorry. So if we don't know our assets, which is the starting point of how do you enforce any zero trust when you don't even know if this asset actually belongs to you, or if this asset is in a good place or not? How do we know that if you don't have the basic understanding of the asset? And so I really strongly feel like before we even get into, actually there's plenty of tools available that will enforce it. If you are able to prove the identity, the tools will enforce the access. But almost every single company in the world, every single government agency does not have a CMDB that is worth anything that they can hang their hat on to say, yep, we know all of our assets. And by the way, your IT team, unfortunately, does not have the view of all of their assets. Maybe they're not as super interested in that. But what happens is that whenever there is a breach or a compromise or whatever it is, it's not the IT team who did not tell you about the asset, or it's not the IT team who did not patch the asset in time that raises their hand and say, oh, that's okay, we will go in front of the committee and explain that we didn't give it, that's why it happened. It's always the security team that is out there explaining why we did not know about this asset, why we did not enforce. And the point here is that if you don't really even know about your assets, you're not going to go anywhere. And so the simple thing of automation is, people talk about enforcing zero trust. Zero trust has to be automated so that when a system or a user is trying to access something in real time, can you make the decision that this is something that we trust or we don't trust? And people are not ready to, you cannot do that without automation. Now, try to go to your IT team and say, hey, let's make sure we deploy automation in cybersecurity and in IT. How about we just patch in an automated way every single critical vulnerability that comes out. Just basic automation. Why wait for an attacker to, we just, as soon as we find it, we'll patch it. How many of you think your IT team will be ready to do that level of automation? Nobody. It's always there is this fear, there is that fear. So if we're not even ready to fix something that we know is actively, in an automated way that we know is actively being used by threat attackers, how are we going to get into the point of being able to have a complete automation for zero trust where we just say, oh, we trust this system or we don't trust this system and take that quote unquote risk. Now, the risk and the challenge that the IT team faces is valid because they're like, something would break. Now, it's always, it's just a race, whether when you try to do something, it's going to break, or is an attacker actually going to come in before that and attack the system? Which of the two are something that you want to hedge on? That really becomes the challenge. And so, in the world of vulnerability management, as an example, we talk about patching, et cetera, but we talk about vulnerability management, and today for most agencies, vulnerability management is basically some old school legacy scanner is scanning your system somewhere and dumping the data in some shared directory in CSV files that you have to parse and try to figure out what is happening, et cetera. But today, vulnerability management has 4 key components. First is knowing all your assets, which pretty much most folks don't really quite know, and that's why a lot of the directives that have come out focus on first step 1 is you need to know all of your assets. And you need to know those assets from a cybersecurity perspective, not just IT perspective of when do we need to replace these assets. The second part, once you figure it out, now the challenge is that everybody has a separate external attack surface management tool. When somebody has written some scripts internally to find their internal assets, then most of people don't know what their technology debt is. It's not synchronized with the CMDB. So just the first part of asset management, which is I think key part of 2404, is like multiple tools trying to even get to the point where we know all of of the assets. Then you need to be able to find all the vulnerabilities that are out there, which is scanners like Qualys. We do a great job. More software is being deployed, more vulnerabilities there are, the more things we're dumping on everybody. And we are at the point today, for sure, where nobody has the resources to fix all the vulnerabilities that are actually being detected or being dumped on the team. Nobody in the world, no government agency, no private company can actually fix everything that is out there. So the third part becomes very important, which is, well, what should we fix then? If we have a limited set of resources and a limited time frame, what is the things that we should focus on that actually is going to reduce the risk down for everybody? And this is one of the good things that more and more of the recent directives talk about agency level risk assessment and risk modeling, which is really actually going to say, maybe you don't need to care about this particular vulnerability because from your agency, what you guys do, what systems you have, you can really focus on certain aspects. But that prioritization becomes super important because we definitely are at the place where we cannot fix everything. And the last part, which is, you could spend millions of dollars operationalizing your asset discovery and your vulnerability detection and prioritization, but if you do not fix that issue before the nation-state attacker gets there, all that money you spend is a waste. Because at the end of the day, it's the outcome which is the most important thing for the government, which is you do not get hacked. The outcome is not, okay, we created a list of all of our assets. The outcome is not that, oh, we have this list of issues that somebody should have fixed. The outcome is we were able to successfully prevent an attacker from exploiting the issues that we think are important for that particular agency. And so this is where I brought up the issue of automation and how many of us are actually willing to go and patch the system. And we always hear this, when the Exchange vulnerability came out, Microsoft, when the Exchange issue came out, we had attackers were attacking Exchange servers that were on the internet, like 40,000 of them in the first 24 hours. That's how fast they are. Average patching, even critical issues, patching takes anywhere from 4 days to 7 days. So you already sort of lost that advantage if we're not focusing on the actual outcome, which is patch management. And that, as I said, there is a reason for that, which is the fear of something breaking. So how do we balance the fear that I might break a system versus the fear that somebody might actually attack if I don't fix it in time? And so one of the things that our team did, Qualys, of course, we have a huge customer base globally. So we analyze, we do about 3 billion detections of vulnerabilities across all of our customers globally. In the last 12 months, I would say we have done that. So I asked the team to say, okay, well, everybody is prioritizing using CVSS high, critical. How many of those 3 billion vulnerabilities are actually CVSS high and critical? And we were expecting maybe 15, 20, 30%. It was quite interesting for us to find out that over 80% of all the detections that Qualys does are CVSS high and critical, because people are not even actually scanning for the ones that are not high or critical. They cannot even fix the ones that are high and critical. They don't want to keep finding more and putting more things on their users. And so that was quite interesting, is that if you're running a vulnerability management program, 80% of what you are finding is something that you're looking to fix because CVSS has high critical focus on those. Now, when Qualys used our own research, and we used our own risk management algorithm with our threat research, et cetera, to actually say, yes, it might be a high critical vulnerability by CVSS, but it is not actually exploitable. There is no active threat attacker going after that. This is not being actively talked about in the dark web, et cetera. So when we bring that context of everything together, that number actually dropped to say, if I really wanted to fix the ones that could be hacked today, it's about 20%, 20, 25% of all of those is what should be focusing on, versus sort of giving this big list for the IT team to do, which they always basically say no, or it's going to take forever to go through that. However, what was interesting is that there were also 10% of the vulnerabilities out of that were the ones that were actually CVSS low or critical, that were not being scanned for, because people just didn't have the time, or they were like, we cannot focus on the low ones that actually were actively used in attacks as part of the kill chain. And so when you take this and put it in the context of you scan and you discover issues and you give all of those issues to the remediation team, if that team spent 5 days patching everything that you gave as high and critical, 4 days of work that they did not lead to any risk reduction for the agency at all. So they did a lot of work to patch, but those were never actually exploitable. And so you spent a lot of your resources, you spent 3/4 of your resources essentially on trying to fix things that are not. Now, and because of the fatigue and the unhappiness that sets in when you have to fix all of these things, the rest of the 20-25% that actually were causing risk were not patched or fixed in a good way, because people were just trying to rush things, and then you don't get all of these things focused. And it also is one of the big reasons why there is resistance to automation, which is required for zero trust, is because the simple statistical thing is that the more things you change on the system, the higher the chance that something is going to go wrong operationally, right? If you apply 100 patches, so if you take all the CVSS high and critical vulnerabilities and you drill those down, and that comes down to 100 patches, and you have to deploy 100 patches on a system, something going wrong on your application is very high probability. However, if you are able to use threat intel for prioritization, if you're able to use the intel from the agency on which assets actually are important for you, just because the exploitable vulnerability is in the environment does not mean that it actually causes risks. So how do you take a risk-based approach? If you can do all of that now, maybe, and focus only on the ones that could be hacked, that number can come down significantly to maybe 3 or 4 patches. Now there is a much better appetite for automation if you say, hey, you just need to fix these 3 things, and the chance of something breaking is significantly reduced, versus we're just going to brute force scan and patch everything, hundreds of things, and then the chance of something going wrong is significantly high. And so This is something that we work quite a bit with our customers, and so 4 or 5 years ago at Qualys, when we introduced to say, what we were trying to say is like, look, our customers are pushing us to say we want real-time vulnerability detection. So on an average, as I talked about, we have about 100 million agents out there. We're able to detect vulnerabilities that are popping up on systems in under 4 hours on an average for any of our customer. But what's the point if it's taking you weeks to fix that particular vulnerability? So technology-wise, I find the vulnerability on this asset. The very next moment, I can actually patch it, just technically. You just have to run a command to say patch this particular system. Yet, because of we need a Jira ticket, we need approval from this, approval from that. It takes 2 weeks to fix that particular issue, which is the human aspect of the fear of something breaking. So the thought was, if we could bring a groundbreaking technology that allows, as soon as the scanner discovers something that is important, we can patch it right away. Your maximum exposure to an attacker getting in and attacking that particular issue can come down to only 4 hours. So within 4 hours of an actual patch coming out from the vendor, we can have it patched on the system. And so we introduced this capability 4 years ago, where there was a lot of pushback. People are like, we're never going to have a vulnerability management vendor and buy patch management from them because patching is an IT thing. This is not for security, et cetera. Fast forward last month when we ran the numbers, Qualys agents deployed 60 million patches across our customer environments in the last 12 months. So there is a desperate need for security folks to be working with the IT teams for cybersecurity related patches, to automate those in ways that you can, to reduce the amount of patches that need to be deployed, to really create an outcome that is very important. And that has been a big success for lots of organizations. Yesterday I was talking to a CISO here, and I was telling them that we have a customer, as an example, they have 400,000 employees. I'm not sure I want to be the HR for that company, but they have 400,000 employees globally across almost 100 countries, using consultants, using laptops everywhere. So they have a Qualys agent, as an example, deployed on those systems so that they can tell their management and their board that no matter what issue, new exploitable vulnerability, and as you saw Google Chrome, last week, 3 exploitable vulnerabilities were announced, which is really frustrating for the IT team. But they have fully automated that. Why is that important? Because when you can do a risk-based automation, which is important for Zero Trust, you can actually take away 50, 60, 70% of the manual work that IT teams are doing for no reason, when those could be automated, which means for the rest 20, 30 super high value assets, et cetera, they can actually focus on doing a better job of ensuring that things don't trip over, by making sure that we leverage automation wherever we can, and then use manual work where we don't have to. And this is really something that is completely different and new than what is happening across in most of the agencies. And so we've been pretty happy as we have been working with a few agencies where they are starting to remove their the scanner, which just only scanned, and then something else to prioritize and something else to patch. It's been very interesting to see the openness in a lot of the agencies to start to replace 2-3 tools with a single system that can find your assets, find your vulnerabilities, prioritize those, and actually also get them fixed, because we are all looking for an outcome. Without an outcome, what's the point? And so that ties really well into the directives are there, but how do you operationalize these directives, right? I mean, they come in paper, but how do you operationalize them in a way that you can actually truly know about all of your assets, right? Like I said, Zero Trust, you cannot trust Zero Trust, or you cannot have Zero Trust if you don't trust the asset. If you have, you trust somebody but if 80% of your assets are unknown to you, how do you trust? And so the ability to operationalize this is very important. How do I know all my external assets? How do I know all my internal assets? How can I find in real time when somebody plugs in a IP camera in my network? How can I find that out within the next hour or so? How do I make a complete inventory? How do I then communicate that? So one of the key things is not just about discovering assets and finding vulnerabilities, but you also have to be able to communicate. I think the 2404 requires within 5 days you have to communicate your findings to CISA whenever they ask for it. How do you communicate this to the right stakeholders? You have your folks like CISA, then you have your IT team who need a slightly different communication, your appropriations, procurement team, they need a different type of communication to show the value of what you're doing. And then at the end of the day, operationalizing these directives are the sole purpose of eliminating risk. If you do all of this work, but you don't actually eliminate the risk, the agency or the government does not have an outcome that is meaningful after all of the money that has been spent. And so our team has been focusing a lot on figuring out what are the best ways. And so if you are doing this thing with 7, 8 different tools, this is in itself is a big operational challenge, trying to just get all of these things to work together. So one of the advantages and what we have focused on is the ability for us to bring all the different types of findings, etc., in a single communication format where you can take the different things that we find, and these reports are available, sample reports are available out here. But can I start with giving exactly the inventory summary of all the assets that you have? Focus on external assets first. Then can I go into saying, hey, these are rogue assets that are being discovered that we don't know, these are related to the agency. Can I get into finding manufacturer, vendor, etc., getting into knowing of your IoT versus non-IoT devices, and which of them are actually risk? Maybe they're not all at risk. How can I have the same report identify my high-value assets? You don't want a separate system to be doing that. Once I find my assets, how do I find all my applications? It's not just about the asset, it's about the application as well. How do I know in real time where each of these location of these assets sit? And then how do I communicate as a risk, not as a list of CVAs, not as a list of all these things need to be done. Here's the risk meters. How can I say my risk score today is 750 on 1,000 and be able to provide something like that? So we would love to get your feedback on this, but the innovation that we are focusing on is how do we bring all the various requirements in a much more simplified capability that you can actually operationalize these directives. Otherwise, they just stay on paper and then they don't actually get done. So that's the Qualys approach that we have taken, is really building a single platform where we can do all these different aspects of cybersecurity. We're not zero trust enforcement. I think there's plenty of tools that can enforce, but we are the engine behind the enforcement. We are the intelligence behind the enforcement that is required to know in real time each and everything about each and every asset that you have, so that you can communicate, you can measure your risk, you can communicate that risk, you can eliminate that risk. And we had a great conversation about AI. AI is one of the biggest conversations happening everywhere. But the question is, how do you measure the risk that is coming from the use of AI to the organization to say, in my limited resources that I have, should I shift that budget now to focusing on AI-related security, or is the ability to pop exploitable vulnerabilities still the biggest attack vector in my organization? If we're not able to quantify the risk, we cannot put the right resources. And so risk-based approach, risk quantification, and communication based on risk are very important, because you might have 50,000 CVEs detected. It looks really bad, but if you're able to say, hey, but by the way, none of those are exploitable and the risk is much lower, that's a much better communication to the IT teams, to the management, to the leaders across the entire spectrum. The other aspect is that use of AI in cybersecurity is going to be very transformational in my mind. It also, in fact, is going to give a big advantage to the defenders over the attackers, because as you know, the attackers, most of them are businesses, unless of course they're nation state, but most of them are businesses. So they are looking to say, you know, we are going around every day paying a bunch of people to poke around internet connected systems to see if we get lucky and actually find a system that we can hack into. So what they are now saying is that, hey, how about we take all of these scans and information that we're seeing from all the assets globally, put it into an LLM so that it will highlight the assets that have the highest chance of a successful compromise. So now I can actually focus only on those rather than every day waking up and spraying. All of us see those on our Comcast modems. People are just wasting their resources trying to hack into even private IP addresses, etc. So this is what they are using. The good thing about that is that they are just using LLMs that are publicly available for the most part. And so you as a defender and we as your partner have the opportunity to leverage the exact same technology, the exact same LLMs that they are using, so you can see this view much before they can see that, and you can actually focus on what needs to be remediated. And so today, this process of figuring out of all the different signals that I'm getting, which ones are actually the ones that are going to lead to a compromise in my system, are going to be what can be significantly transformational. Or even the simple thing of we say, oh, high value assets. How do you know what's a high value asset? Somebody has to tell you. Most people, they don't tell you. IT goes and they bring up 10 new systems in the data center because there's a new release. You have no idea. The great use case that Qualys is bringing for use of AI, we see millions of systems that are tagged as high value by customers across the world and in federal agencies. We built a model. So when a new system comes on, with AI, we can actually tell you that, hey, looking at systems like this, a million systems like this in the past, this should be a high-value system, but you forgot to tag it as a high-value system. So we can actually alert you on that. We can actually do it for you. So I do think that the use of AI technologies, but as Monica said, that it is about the data. If you don't have the data, as I showed earlier, we are doing trillions and trillions of data points, collections every single day, huge data set. And that's where we are partnering with government agencies to see with that data and the insights that we can bring, how can we leverage AI throughout that particular use case and help that, again, to reduce the amount of efforts that we have to put. If we can reduce the amount of things we have to fix, we have a much better chance of automation. And if we have a better chance of automation, that's the only way we are going to be able to leverage zero trust. And the same applies to the cloud. So we have expanded this capability and technology into cloud as well for AWS, Azure, GCP. Similar concept of risk management. Just because you have plenty of buckets exposed does not mean you have risk. Just because you have misconfigured buckets, that does not mean that you have necessarily have risk. So most of the people, when they ask how's your cloud security, they're not able to tell you whether the risk is high, medium, low, but they can tell you exactly how many buckets are exposed, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So focus for us is really continuing to partner to take a different approach to giving an outcome that actually fixes things. And for us, automation is key, and without automation, there is no zero trust. So. That's all. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. We're super excited about partnering, and all day long we have our product managers, engineers here. Would love to get feedback from you, and we have plenty of different things, reports, etc. here, so that we can understand how best we can help you operationalize these directives to provide an outcome which is of automation and of zero trust. So, thank you very much.